from the letter to the Romans, the words of our call to worship. All things work together for good, for those who love God. This is about making connections, seeing how things that seem separate in fact are not, and how the pursuit of holiness asks us to employ joined up thinking, because life is a web, a living whole, not a muddle of things that have nothing to do with each other. When we get to the place of doing it right, righteousness, we start to see some radical solutions, because everything is connected. All things work together for good, for those who love God. If you were able to make the time to read the article I posted during the week, you'll have seen its assertion, we'll never stop climate change without ending white supremacy. You may have been quicker than I am and paying better attention, but though that assertion made perfect and obvious sense once I read the article, it was not a connection I'd ever made before. The author, Hop Hopkins of the Sierra Club, says this: I really believe, in my heart of hearts, after a lifetime of thinking and talking about these issues, that we will never survive the climate crisis without ending white supremacy. Here's why. You can't have climate change without sacrifice zones, and you can't have sacrifice zones without disposable people, and you can't have disposable people without racism. We're in this global environmental mess because we have declared parts of our planet to be disposable. In order to treat places and resources as disposable, the people who live there have to get treated like rubbish too. And the article goes on to explain this carefully, both how it played out in history and how it continues to affect people all over the world today, and moves us inexorably toward a planet riven by the terrors of war and disease, ultimately uninhabitable. The well-known Chief Seattle's testimony makes the case vividly and poetically. All things are connected. Whatever befalls the earth befalls the sons of the earth. Man did not weave the web of life. He is merely a strand in it. Whatever he does to the web, he does to himself. If you, like me, have been following the many articles and videos filling our news feeds since the death of George Floyd, bearing witness to the unthinkable atrocities carried out in the relentless pursuit of white supremacy, you may be feeling tired and dazed. If you have followed the news of the UK government riding on the coattails of American practice, wanting to remove some of the safeguards and requirements placed upon our food industry and privatise our health service, you may be feeling discouraged and dismayed. Ricocheting between anxiety about coronavirus, absorbing the news of the re-emergence of Ebola, watching helplessly as the ancient woodlands are felled and the sacred grounds mined, you may feel the whole project is beyond you. And the best thing to do is take refuge in carbohydrate and TV, in the hope that your life will end before it all gets too bad. It may be, of course, that you haven't really noticed any of this, in which case forgive me for disturbing your peace of mind. For many of us, the question that arises urgently is a simple one. What can we do? For people of colour, trapped in the system, harassed on every side, oppressed here and exploited overseas, there has been an imposed helplessness. Shackled, imprisoned, enslaved, what can we do? For people living in poverty, just doing their best to get by, eating poor quality food and living in insecure, substandard accommodation, trapped in cycles that are all but inescapable, the same question. What can we do? For Christians, speaking up for peace, but attending churches hallmarked by the same power games and political indifference, arises the same question. What can we do? For the mothers of children who will grow up in whatever world we leave them, the question presses urgently. What can we do? The title that sits over our meeting for worship today is Do What You Can, with what you have, where you are. Our Bible reading was that story about ordinary people afraid of coming judgment and doom, asking John the Baptist, what should we do? Let's look briefly at what he said. Firstly, produce fruit in keeping with repentance. That's the crux of the matter. Don't come to church and pray for the poor and for wars to cease, then go out and vote for the administration that oppresses the poor and ramps up the arms deals. Don't express your disapproval over violence in demonstrations, but keep quiet about violence in the police force. Don't post photos of cute animals on Instagram, then take the kids out to McDonald's for a family supper of the cheapest meat from animals kept in unspeakable conditions in places that aren't even called farms, only meat plants. Produce fruit in keeping with repentance. Thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven has a requirement of activism. John the Baptist went on to say, and do not begin to say to yourselves, we have Abraham as our father. He wanted us to root out the practices of entitlement and privilege, the labelling of people groups as superior and inferior, the demonisation of the other, and the blaming of the victim. Do not begin to say to yourselves, we have Abraham as our father, for I tell you that out of these stones God can raise up children for Abraham. What should we do then? The crowd asked. John answered, anyone who has 2 shirts should share with the one who has none, and anyone who has food should do the same. I read 2 life habits in that instruction. One is radical simplicity, and the other is radical sharing. Not anyone who has 2 shirts should watch Queer Eye for some fashion tips, then get onto eBay and stock up with half a dozen more, which frankly is what you might have hoped he would be going to say. Not anyone who has food should get a freezer, and there are some really good DIY projects for shelving out your pantry. John the Baptist wasn't fashion forward, and he wasn't a prepper by any stretch of anyone's imagination. Anyone who has 2 shirts should share with the one who has none, and anyone who has food should do the same. It's so simple, and yet so hard to do. But look what comes next. Even tax collectors came to be baptized. "Teacher," they asked, "what should we do?" "Don't collect any more than you're required to," he told them. And then some soldiers asked him, "And what should we do?" And he replied, "Don't extort money, and don't accuse people falsely. Be content with your pay." And what I love about his recommendations is that they are small. Take one step, and take the step that is of relevance to your life. Speak truth to power, yes, and speak up for those who have no voice. Stand with the oppressed. But don't make a project out of getting busy pointing the finger about what all those awful others are doing that they shouldn't be. Keep your life simple and small so you don't get yourself lost in the confusion, and take the steps that have relevance to you. Make amends by living the change you want to see. Have nothing to do with entitlement, inequality, privilege, or supremacy. Share what you have. Don't be greedy. Walk away from consumerism. Embrace honesty and transparency. Practice contentment. Do what you can with what you have, where you are. We can't expect it to be easy. We have to bear in mind that John the Baptist was beheaded and Jesus was crucified. Not easy. But keep it simple, keep it small, and keep it up. I hope that helps.